Hello, I'm your host, Effie Villarino, and I have the pleasure today to have with me two New Yorkers, Yael Bizouati-Kennedy and Sean Manion, who are the authors of hot off the press book with the title Blockchain for Medical Research, Accelerating Trust in Healthcare. And obviously this is of great interest to all of us. I actually met, so to speak, in my network, Sean Manion, a couple of years ago. I linked to him because I saw that he had founded Science Distributed. I know that he has had an early interest on how to use blockchain and distributed systems to improve the way medical research is done. He has a doctorate in neuroscience and recently has joined, I understand, Consensus Health as the chief science officer. And Yael is a journalist with a long career, which includes financial services too, and apparently has been bitten by the blockchain bug. And we will hear from both of you. Welcome, Yael. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, Effie.
So let me start about asking you both, and first you, Yael, since I don't know the journey that brought you to blockchain and medical research. Why don't you briefly tell us about this and where you're at today with respect to the book?
Sure. So I kind of fell into blockchain by accident a little bit. I started writing about it about maybe 3.5 years ago or something like that. And I became very, very interested in the topic for various reasons. And I covered blockchain as a journalist from different angles. So I wrote about women and blockchain, which is very interesting. I wrote about blockchain for good and social justice. And I wrote about blockchain in healthcare. And that's how I came across Sean, who I interviewed for this article, and who then I interviewed for subsequent articles. And he became a really good resource for me and helped me with my research and helped me to connect with other people, etc. So that was that was maybe like 2 years, a year and a half ago, something like that. And then Sean asked me if I would be interested. He had this idea for this book and asked me if I would be interested in helping him co-author that book. And I was. So that's how this book, how we started to work together, really. And the funny part is that we actually never met. And we did this book like completely remotely, based on trust, really.
Fantastic. I'll come back to you, especially about one chapter that has intrigued me. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about the vision of open science that you've repeatedly spoken and written about, and I know that you have interest, and I assume I have not read the book yet. What is it all about, and what is your focus?
Certainly, and the idea of open science is not a new one. It's in its latest incarnation, been around for decades as something people who do science want to move towards, but really is something that the modern science hundreds of years ago looked like all around. People would do different types of research and report their findings, and these got to be public in a very slow way. And as science started to expand, especially following World War II and expansion of funding into science, there started to be almost an explosion of scientific findings. But a lot of those started to become very limited or very proprietary. and it was not as open as it was before. And the openness in science is what you get in peer review and you get in the vetting of science, which over the long run gives you what is true and what is, you know, at least preliminary, seems good but doesn't pan out. But there hasn't really been a full expansion to open science over the past few decades, despite many efforts. And I felt that blockchain as a technology, as a tool, could really help the trust issues that would allow us to move back towards open access and open science. And one of my goals with the book, which, you know, as Yael said, was you know, something that it came from, you know, our work together on a couple of articles, and being able to communicate this was key. So working with a journalist like Yael, who's very seasoned in taking these ideas out from the scientific closet and moving them out into the world was important. And I think open science has had that challenge. It has been communicated very passionately by scientists for reasons they understand, but the world doesn't. And so the policy and the funding for science hasn't moved in the direction to help make it happen. I felt, and I think that we've articulated in the book, how blockchain as a layer of trust can start to be used as a way to move this idea forward, to open up the expansion of science, to share data and accelerate findings so that we get better health outcomes and better science more quickly.
Great, and obviously it is a very sensitive topic these days with the pandemic, and a lot of people realizing that we are not openly collaborating on medical research. Maybe we're not focusing enough on medical research, and as you're saying, that means everything about funding, about human resources, about the ways we work together, and so on. Sean, is there something that is going on right now, given the current situation, that is in alignment with what you are envisioning and proposing in the book? Or are you seeing that in this environment we have an acceleration of the ideas that you're proposing?
I think that we have an acceleration, and, you know, definitely people have become more interested in what we put in this book, which was written pre-COVID. But you've seen an acceleration by necessity of the very ideas of sharing everything, sharing data, sharing findings, getting that information out there to the community of scientists, to health experts. And that's happened because of need in the COVID situation. But imagine if that same level of effort could happen for cancer research, or for healthcare research, or for, you know, I'm a brain scientist, for traumatic brain injury research. It does in small pockets, but not with any of the, you know, enthusiasm and push what we're seeing now. I think what we're seeing is, you know, gonna burn out after this problem is solved. But I would love to see it transfer over into other areas. Unfortunately, you're never going to get everybody caring as much about one thing as you do about this right now. So how can you set up a new framework of trust to allow that acceleration to happen in a different way, to allow it to happen, as Yael was saying, with all of those users agreeing on a certain governance? And I think that's what we've laid the plan out for. Not in every detail, because it's a very big plan, but especially towards the end, we lay out how the funding agencies, how the research agencies, and how the researchers and healthcare providers themselves need to start to look at this, to do research and development with it, and set up that system that allows what we're doing for COVID in that rapid sharing to happen all around without collapsing the system.
Yeah, and obviously you're not talking only about a crisis situation like this one. You're talking about research and goals that are longer term and bigger, and how to do it better and faster. What comes to mind is you said that it's already happening in this crisis situation. Is it happening really? Is data shared between different entities, be it public entities, be it semi private or private entities, are they coming together in this situation and sharing resources, data, human, and so on to solve this problem? Or are we do have silos for all sorts of reasons. Everybody talks, pretends that it's only about security, but it's not only about security, it's about fear of bad actors and other proprietary interests. So talking actually yesterday to a quite important person here at the canton of Geneva, and he was saying the frustration of bringing together the government with the big health organizations or UN organizations, the private sector, the scientists, and so on, and that we don't have the digital infrastructure to do that.
Definitely, there is a will and there is a sharing, but it's very ad hoc, and it's not built to the system of optimization for standards or for efficiency or for quality. Not to be glib, but I made a joke the other day on social media, maybe a serious statement, that the best time to build that infrastructure was 5 years ago. The second best time is today. It's not going to be instantaneous to build these standards, and we have standards work going on to set up the infrastructure to change patterns of human behavior. Going back to that blockchain as people will take time. It will take education, and it will take money. I think there's a will to do that, but people don't know exactly how. We've outlined a sort of framework of a plan in the final chapter, but it will take some work, and it will take some diving into the details and adjusting the technology and the governance to the existing system, as well as adjusting the existing system to the future that we want to put it as. And I think that's a challenge. So there is sharing going on, but not in an optimal way yet, because we don't have the infrastructure for it.
And do you think that the format that will take the lead to make this happen, to lay out the roadmap and execute it, will be some kind of an association format like the Libra Association or other associations? Or do you see that it will start out with a top-down approach where, for example, the government takes the lead? What do you think is most probable?
I think it's going to have to be a hybrid, because unfortunately I've seen top down, I've seen bottom up. Bottom up works well in a, hey, we've got an enthusiastic problem we want to solve way. And that's where you get the seed ideas. And Consensus Health, that I'm the chief scientific officer for, has a Stop COVID hackathon going on right now that we hope to get some of those seed answers. But getting the buy-in on an enterprise level takes some top-down initiative, and takes the funding and the regulatory management in order to get it in place. So you really need a partnership between those things. Getting university consortia together, getting pharma consortia together, these will be important too. But unless you have the major players wanting to move, and then the regulatory control systems as well as the funding systems also in line, and then the people themselves, the scientists and the researchers and the providers also in line, it's very hard to get things to happen on a broad level. We hope the vision we've laid out in the book is gonna help get people in line, but we'll see how well that happens. I think it's a push, but it isn't the complete shove that needs to happen.
What I'm hearing from you is that the dream triangle of having the public sector with the private sector and, if you want, all the big foundations, the charities, the capital, and so on, all working together towards one goal and building this infrastructure is what we should be going to. We know it a long time, but hopefully in healthcare, this will become a priority after this crisis, and blockchain could be the infrastructure to build this upon.
I think it's going to be a critical tool in addition to what we've already talked about with regard to the trust that it can bring and that sort of facilitation of trust. There's an incentive layer, and that comes from the cryptocurrency, that comes from the tokenization that's really made blockchain what it is today. I think that's a more advanced use case in healthcare and research, but I think it's a critical case because incentives need to be there at all levels. One of the challenges of science now is, to the extent that it is scaled, you have a misalignment of incentives in, the publish or perish sort of way. What I need for, in the academic track to get tenure or to make it to the next level might not be in line with what society needs for the long-term advancement of health, in getting only the truth or the best truth that we can out there. I think that incentive system of tokenization and blockchain is going to be critical to helping to move that forward. But I think it's also going to be complicated. Blockchain, for finance is kind of understood. It resembles in a way the exchange that we already know from fiat currency. But scientific data and healthcare data is a much more complex data set with different degrees of reliability and different degrees of trust. And there's also a lot of non-monetary incentive factors that have to be mapped in a token economy that you would set up for science. There's 64 million hours a year of volunteer time to peer review papers. The trust engine, the proof of science, if you will, in the legacy system of science is volunteered time that if you make monetized, you actually degrade the integrity of. So how do you maintain and capture that and also accelerate science? And there needs to be some different ways of looking at it from a crowdsourcing point of view, but also from an incentivization point of view, which blockchain can bring that structure.
As I'm not, obviously, I'm much more focused in financial services and technology around that, and maybe more touches easier, closer to e-commerce rather than health. Do we not have today some blockchain that rewards peer review participants? Do we have that?
There are several out there. There are definitely some great pilots going on. I know some of these people. I talk to them. For me, I think that's some of the early R&D that is needed. But I also think it's not a simple rewarding these things, because if you reward them monetarily or for something that can be exchanged, that system can be exploited in a way that can undercut the integrity of that system. So it needs to be carefully studied. How does this impact? Do I still have the same high level of peer review if I start tokenizing it? Or do I get a degradation because people come in and do rapid and lower quality peer reviews in order to collect tokens? And are they more effective at getting into the system and exploiting it? And then you get a downward path of less good science. And there's not a hard and fast cutoff. There's what's called predatory journals that don't have very good peer review. We don't want science to slip into that, or else then you end up with just noise and not signal and not as much advancement in health. So I think that's the challenge. But there's some people looking at it, and I think it's great to see that. I want to try and bring those groups together, maybe in a consortium way.
You bring up a quite an important and much broader topic of redesigning the incentives in all our economy. And it's not only the financial incentives, right? All the incentives that you spoke about that are hidden because I want tenure and I need to do XYZ to do that, or I want to influence certain decisions and so on. And obviously, Yael, also in your profession in journalism, there's a lot of wrong incentives and conflicts of interest that are not clear how to fix. Are you seeing there any promising, if you want, blockchain initiatives that are trying to address this issue in journalism, how journalists get rewarded, how the conflicts of interest in that profession?
I have not come across anything yet. I don't know if people are working on using blockchain in the journalism space. Do you know, Sean? I've not heard anything in that space. I think, sorry. I think I don't know how I feel about that. I think there's a lot of journalism going on right now that are clickbait articles and all that, and so the journalists, as you know, are paid by views, etc.
Yeah.
I don't feel good at all
Yeah.
about that
And
type
and
of
linked to the advertising
exactly.
industry and how that one has
Yeah.
its own issues and so on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm really old school when it comes to journalism, and I really believe strongly in the value of
mhm.
journalism. And yes, I don't think, I'm not sure, how blockchain could be used in that space. And if it is, perhaps in the sharing, of articles and research and ideas, it would be a great thing to use, but not as incentives, because that, for me, that's,
Okay.
I think we could fall really fast into that, clickbait articles, and then the blurring of advertising and content versus pure journalism. But
Right.
yeah.
Great.
And if I
Great.
could just add on there, because the two of you have actually kind of sparked an idea in my head right here, that in some ways journalism resembles science. There is especially at the core of academic science a distrust of of money and monetization for science, because they believe it may steer the integrity off. And to some degree, journalism is not unlike science in that you are observing and you are reporting. There's differences on what you're reporting and what and how that happens. But I wonder if both of those fields don't have some similarity in how to manage those incentives and to bring about a more efficient system with that same level of balancing both action and integrity. So maybe we need to, maybe the next book will be on journalism and science, in tandem moving forward with blockchain.
That's a good idea.
For me, I always say, forget about Bitcoin prices and what's going on there and the adoption rate. I think that blockchain has already succeeded largely because it has forced us to really rethink and has given us a tool which in the end we might say is not good enough for what we want to do, but it's been the reason, if you want, that we are saying maybe we can fix this. Is this what we want to fix? What is our vision? And I think that it's been so cross-industry and so penetrating in opening our thinking. Should we go open source our networks? What degree of transparency? How many intermediaries? Just rethinking everything in a way that we have not done it before. And it's not like, these are completely new ideas, but it's kind of a basket of ideas that I feel resonates with the issues that we have in our society today. Do you agree with this sort of way of thinking?
Restarting with the question, I think back to what Yael was talking about earlier. The blockchain is people in the network. I think that the applications will differ from industry to industry, and I think that's what we're seeing. And there will need to be an engagement with the experts as well as the average user in each industry. And I think that some industries will move forward faster, both because of rapid maturation as well as the money that's gone into it. FinTech is obviously further ahead than any other industry in application of blockchain. Supply chain is rapidly, gaining real-world traction on a very wide level. Healthcare in general and medical research specifically is still very, very nascent and still learning what are the different use cases where it can be used. And we've got to see the experimentation. We've got to see the consortiums. We've got to see the experts who really know the system apply that to the technology. One of the things we've done in the hackathon that we have ongoing for Stop COVID is, in addition to just having a hackathon with people trying to develop tools that might be able to help with different aspects of the current crisis is we brought in dozens of medical and health experts who are able to mentor those groups, to give them a reality of what it is they're trying to solve. So they're not solving from an island. They're actually solving with experts from that area. And I think industry by industry, you're going to need to see that subject matter expert and technical expert come together.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Not in a lab situation as most hackathons. And this actually we have seen in fintech innovation where, you know, technologists in the earlier days were innovating in financial services, and that's okay if you're doing consumer banking, that maybe is understood. But as you go deeper into financial services, which is much more complex, these people don't understand how it works. So they're trying to disrupt something that they don't have expert knowledge. So that is exactly what is needed, what you're saying, to bring the experts and actually both sides learn from that. It's very much interactive, and maybe that helps for future iterations of this collaboration. I'm sure that if you repeat these types of hackathons, you'll see a huge improvement from both sides, from the interaction. Okay, guys, I think that I would like to wrap up, and thank you so much for being with us today. I will share the link of your book and hope to touch bases with you a year from now and have a lot more that has been done and is in the pipeline. Thank you.
Thanks, Safi.
Thank you.